Well, welcome everyone. My name is Kerry Ford, and I have been a disciple for just about 21 years. It'll be 21 years at the end of this month. And I have lived all over, baptized in New York, and have moved throughout this entire country. Been on all the coasts, and including the north and the south. That doesn't really count as a coast, but and have also been in a couple of places internationally. So, um, just wanted to give you a little bit about myself as we get into this. But the title of this message is called "The Journey of Finding My Worth." Which is a continuous journey, persevering in my relationship with God through my battles with insecurity. So we're going to start off in Mark 5, and we're going to pretty much camp out there the duration of this class. So if you'll turn with me to Mark 5, I'm going to read verses 25 through 34. It says, "And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I could just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," the disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." So I stopped and I asked myself, who is this woman? What is her background? What scars does she carry with her into this stage in her life? Did she grow up with brothers, with sisters? What was her relationship like with her dad? How about with her mom? What dreams, life goals did she have? Did she dream of having kids? What shame did she go through with this disease? When childbearing is what determined the worth of a woman back then, and oftentimes we can still feel that way. Um, and a question that we'll kind of get to later, but thinking about how did she manage that isolation? I'll explain a little bit more about that. So, keeping your finger in Mark 5, or just knowing that you might want to go back to that, if you can turn over to Leviticus 15. So it's Leviticus 15, and we'll pick up in verse 19. I just want to paint a picture of the law, the Mosaic law that this woman was living under at this time. So Leviticus 15, verse 19 says, when a woman has her regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. Anything she lies on during her period will be unclean, and anything she sits on will be unclean. Anyone who touches her bed will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. Anyone who touches anything she sits on will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. Whether it is the bed or anything she was sitting on, when anyone touches it, they will be unclean until evening. If a man has sexual relations with her and her monthly flow touches him, he will be unclean for 7 days. Any bed he lies on will be unclean. Well, when a woman has a discharge of blood for many days at a time, other than her monthly period, or has a discharge that continues beyond her period, she will be unclean as long as she has the discharge, just as in the days of her period. Any bed she lies on while her discharge continues will be unclean, as it is her bed during her monthly period, and anything she sits on will be unclean, as during her period. Anyone who touches them will be unclean. They must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be unclean till evening. When she was cleansed from her discharge, she must count off 7 days, and after that she will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day she must take 2 doves and 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to sacrifice one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. In this way he will make atonement for her before the Lord, for the uncleanliness of her discharge. You must keep the Israelites separate from things that make them unclean, so they will not die in their uncleanliness or for defiling my dwelling place, which is among them. And it ends in verse 33 with talking about how to be ceremonially, that this all equals ceremonially unclean. So if you'll turn back to Mark 5, or just keep your thumb there just as a reference point. This unnamed woman in this story is a woman who had suffered for 12 years from a certain kind of bleeding. It's often translated as hemorrhaging. She's visited many doctors, and none of them have been able to heal her. That's what it talks about in Luke, and Luke's reference of this in Luke 8:43, that there wasn't anyone that could heal her. In fact, the word says in Mark 5:26 that her pain grew worse. So seeing doctors, her pain actually grew worse. It seems like she's acting out in a last ditch effort. Have you ever been there? Um, Her very presence in a large crowd would be frowned upon in the society because she was considered unclean. I didn't count how many times it says in Leviticus, but it says it a lot. That word unclean. I imagine her normal existence would often have been spent watching people skirt around her and avoid the possibility of contact. No brushing or touching or sharing friendly gestures on the path. She lived in isolation. She would have been known for her uncleanliness. Anything and anyone she touched would have been considered unclean, or even the chair she sat on, if you touched it, would have been considered unclean. It's been an odd year with COVID, with physical distancing. Imagine 12 years of that, and you're the only one going through it. So a little bit about myself and this journey I'm on. So growing up with only brothers and older brothers, it shaped me in a lot of different ways. I was a tomboy trying to be like my brothers in order to really win my father's approval. I was never physically stronger than my brothers. I could not lose weight like my brothers. Men traditionally have a much easier time losing weight. And often I was just not as interested in the same thing as my brothers, at least not with the same amount of passion. I grew up overweight. In 7th grade, my parents actually took me to a dietitian to see if there was something wrong. And what we found out is that I had a low metabolism. So I would need to eat healthier and work out harder than those around me, essentially for the rest of my life. I grew up hearing that I was overweight, that I was fat, big. I was picked on all the time, both by my brothers and by kids in school. Uh, Hearing comments that my dad would make, things like that. Trying to be more like my brothers. I had short hair and at times was mistaken for a boy. This all led to me having a low self-esteem. There were a number of reasons I didn't feel good enough for my dad. My appearance was really the top one. Along with that, though, I saw how he treated my brothers, talking sports with them, coaching their soccer team, never coaching mine, engaging with them at baseball games. See, I grew up in Minnesota, and the Twins. We were big Twins fans, and we'd all get a turn being able to be the kid that gets to go with our dad to the baseball game, and I would really look forward to it. and I started to see this pattern when I would get to go with him. He had company seats, and so he knew the men that we were sitting around, and he would talk to the men and to their boys, and not talk to me. Um, that was really hard. It was really discouraging to see that, thinking something was wrong with me. I even collected hockey cards to find some common ground with my dad. You don't usually hear about hockey cards; you hear about baseball cards, but hockey players have it too. Um, Now, don't get me wrong. My dad is a super loving father. He's always been there for me when I need him. But this day to day stuff, feeling rejected, tossed aside, just not good enough, not as worthy as my brothers for his attention. This stuff is the stuff that impacts my mindset today. I have to fight against the negative thoughts I tell myself on a daily basis that stem from the messages that I heard and experienced as a kid. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Being baptized in, I was baptized in 2000, and I started going on dates really for the first time. I had a couple of dates in high school, but most of that was school dances, prom, things like that. Uh, I never really felt like I was someone worth people paying attention to. I never felt attractive. Honestly, I didn't believe I could be loved by a man because of my appearance or my weight. Um, I poured my energy into serving God and then into my career. I felt these were things I had control over, but getting someone to love me, I have no control over that. Little did I know, I really don't have a lot of control over my career or any of that as well. Um, though I prayed about it. Um, you see, I kind of felt like this bleeding woman, that there was some sign over my head that said I was unclean. Don't touch me. Um, I wanted to have a family. I wanted to have kids. I prayed for decades for my husband to find me. Um, about 10 years ago, halfway in through my walk with God, I can distinctly remember a conversation with my grandmother where she's looked down at my dog at the time and said, "Is this the closest thing I'm going to get to a great grandchild?" It was heart wrenching. I wasn't even dating anyone, let alone married to someone. Um, it was about the same time, um, about 10 to 11 years into my walk with God, that I started this protein based diet with a coach. And I made sure I did exactly as I was told nutrition wise, and kept up on my exercise routine. I was concerned about my health in a lot of ways. I had started to have these major back spasms, and it just was really not good. And so I started to see a chiropractor and then went through this weight loss program. Being on this program for an entire year, which included absolutely no sugars, including fruits, I had lost over 100 pounds. I went from being a size 24, 26 to more like a 10, 12. And you know what? It didn't change my view of myself at all. Uh, though my main focus was my overall health, and I was much healthier. The added bonus of losing weight did not take away my insecurities. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the same woman. I saw someone who I believed was not worthy of being loved. I want to show you a couple of pictures just as a point of reference. So the picture on it's my right, was from 2011, and then 2012. You can't really see that one a whole lot. Um, and then this was a year ago. I didn't have like a good picture more recently of me. And I show those just as a reference of this mindset that I had only ever seen myself one way. And no matter where I got, I probably was unhealthy. I mean, I probably had lost too much weight. Um, and I still didn't see myself any differently. Um, I didn't see the worth that was in me. So what I realized is I really needed to trim out the unhealthy stuff that was in my heart. because it was my heart that is plagued here. God created me. If I'm to say that I'm not worthy of love, I'm saying that God made me wrong. And I can't accept that. Um, and Jesus said in verse 30, who touched my clothes? What an odd comment, right? His disciples point that one out. You're crowded around so many people. So can you imagine how this woman with the unexplained bleeding was feeling? Having been rejected for 12 years and finally feeling whole, she's being sought out by the one who healed her. What would he do? Would he take the healing away? What kind of trouble would she be in for having touched him? Because she was unclean. It took immense courage for her to come forward and admit that she had touched Jesus's cloak, believing he would heal her. Extraordinary bravery for her to tell her story, to declare it in front of everybody what had happened. Could you imagine the mocking that happened around her? But Jesus knew what he was doing. If she had just crept away, would anyone have believed that she was now okay? After 12 years, would she have been accepted back into society by identifying her publicly and asking her to tell her story? Jesus didn't just heal her physically, he restored her. She had his full attention. Jesus called her daughter. He was publicly declared not just to be, she was publicly declared not just to be ritually clean, but accepted fully by God's Son. Instead of Jesus telling her not to tell anyone, like he so often did with people he healed, he was declaring to the world so that everyone knew that she was restored in body, mind, and soul. Here's what I think about Jesus. If we seek him in faith, he's there for us. He's interested in us. He wants to know us. He longs to restore us and respond to our faith and love. He's not in a hurry. Sometimes we wish he was, right? He gives us time and he gives us his full attention. Nothing is as important to Jesus as the moment that he is connecting with us, with you. In James 1:25, you don't need to turn there. It says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. So it's amazing what happens after Jesus heals this bleeding woman. He goes on to heal a 12-year-old girl, which is in the Luke 8 version, that they say that she's 12. And the very reason he was passing through was to go to get to this girl to heal her. Immediately, we can kind of notice this biblical significance of the number 12 that has connections all over the place, all over the Bible. In most cases, the number 12 is actually a representation of authority and perfection. This number can also represent the church and faith in general. It can also be a symbol of divine rule, and a symbol of the perfect government of God. Other biblical significances, I think of the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles. They're all perfectly a part of God. For these women, the 12 years of bleeding, this woman, and then the 12-year-old girl, we can also see that these two female characters, the bleeding woman and the daughter, and Jairus's daughter, this girl, are unnamed by society, but then beautifully placed by Jesus when he refers to both of them as daughter. It's a sweet, intimate naming that is so needed by both of these women. Another intimate moment is the act of touch that he offers to both of them. So as women, we know what it's like to bleed. We lose a part of our body every month. And it's painful, centering, mindful, oftentimes difficult, both emotionally and physically. Um, Even from biblical times, the idea of having blood outside of the body has been considered unclean or dirty. I find it really unfortunate that the blood that we shed as women routinely, for the sake of giving life, has been shamed throughout history. Women, simply by having a body that works, are considered unclean and cast out routinely. This unnamed woman not only suffered from continuous bleeding for many years, but also that dirty, unclean feeling resulting from being stigmatized and isolated. Hers was a continual existence of pain and being cast out. Jesus meets her in this space. Instead of being repulsed or disgusted by her, walking away from her, he responds with peace. Instead of rejecting her, he responds with acceptance and grace. He calls her daughter and heals her. For me, he essentially says, "My child, you are worthy." Healing doesn't always look exactly like what we were hoping for, but sometimes healing looks like acceptance, belonging, and connection. Sometimes healing looks like for me, not letting insecurity have a hold on my life. Um, I thought finding a career would help me overcome my insecurity. It didn't. I thought losing weight and getting healthier would help me overcome my insecurity. Never did. Um, I thought leading Bible studies and helping others to God would help me overcome my insecurity. I thought getting married would overcome my insecurity. Sure didn't. These are the things that I live with, and what I learned, what I continue to learn, what I need to learn every day is that God can help me overcome my insecurity. Only His word reminds me how valuable I am, how worthy I am. So I have a stack of index cards. Just wanted to show you. There are a whole bunch of them. This has been a journey for me this year to do this. And on these, I have written down all kinds of scriptures that remind me of who God is and who I am to God. His love letter is vast. Um, over this past year, we've endured COVID. I got married. I moved to a new city. I started helping lead a new church. I became a stepmother. Along with all the other things, I lost a job. I gained a job. Yeah, I have a lot of insecurities, and these scriptures really have been instrumental for me. I've persevered in prayer for 21 years, now watching prayers get answered in ways that I don't always like, and may even say are unanswered prayers, though we all know every prayer is answered, just maybe not the way that we want them to be. Um, Losing hope in particular dreams, feeling cast out at times by society. The children I wanted to bear as a dream I had to let go of, like the bleeding woman I imagine had to. The struggles associated with that, even though, most of my life I didn't even want children, but the last, 10 years or so that I did, um, it's been hard to accept. Sometimes I question if I'm actually living out the life God wants me to. Um, but what helps me persevere, what helps me know God's love is His word. He calls me to Him. The world calls me to a set of standards and points out my disappointments, my lack of, but God calls me His treasured possession, the apple of His eye, the hope set before Him, His daughter. And that list could go on. You see, when I focus on the word and persevere in that, my insecurities do wash away. I go through these scriptures when I'm feeling insecure, and I just read them over and over and over until that insecurity just washes out. I asked at the beginning of this, who is this woman? What is her background? In many ways, I don't think it matters. I think that she's unnamed because she's a part of all of us. What is your background in your 12 years of fill in the blank? For me, insecurities that people of this world have made worse for me, those who have cast me out. We all need to reach out and touch his cloak, have him stop and see our faith and heal us, daughters. Just a couple, it looks like I have 2 seconds left. Yep. So a couple of questions if you want to stay on is, what are your touch the cloak moments? What lies does Satan tell you? What are you willing to do for the right relationship, knowing that Jesus is always that relationship? Does your healing always involve physical restoration? What's the difference between being healed and being cured? And what resonates most with you? What's challenging for you? I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Women's Day events.